Hey everyone, this is episode 5 of my Patching with Purpose series. In this series, we're using the elements and principles of music to kind of guide us in a plan for patching the Moog Sound Studio. If you haven't seen any of the other videos, I suggest that you at least go back and watch the first one because that's where I lay out the sort of framework that I'm thinking of as I'm doing this. This video is going to be all about dynamics. So typically when we think about dynamics, we're thinking about loud and soft, but we can also broaden that definition to think about things being dense, instrumentation, and having lots of different instruments versus a few, things like that. We want a lot of change, a lot of dynamics to happen within our song or within our patch. So right from the get-go, I have to admit that this one was actually really challenging for me. And I was really struggling to come up with ideas and kind of dragging my feet about making this video, thinking, what did I get myself into by creating this series without a full-fledged plan before I started? But through the process, it really highlighted that this is actually a really great way to make music, because as I started going through it and thinking about it, I came up with a bunch of different ideas. And if I had to do multiple patches just with a dynamics focus, I think I could take some of those ideas and go in all kinds of different directions. So eventually it worked out and I came up with the patch that I was playing on the intro. So today I'm going to walk you through that patch and show you a couple of different ways that you can patch the Sound Studio together to create these different dynamics. So let's go really quickly through the tonality and harmony and kind of overall plan that I was going for when I jumped into it. I'm going to be using the C Lydian scale. I really love using the Lydian mode. It's based on a major triad, so it's a major mode, which means it's going to have a happier feel rather than a sad or dark feel. But it's not just as plain happy as like a major scale. To me, it gives this sort of sense of wonder or maybe a twinge of sadness to it. So it's like happiness, but like a relief at the end of a bad experience kind of thing. I could come up with so many analogies for what it sounds like, but to me, it's a much more deep and complex, happy or major feel to it. So I really love using it a lot, and we're going to use it here today. We're going to use C Lydian. Also, going into this, I knew that I wanted to leave a lot of space and that I wanted the textures to be somewhat smooth and have more of an ambient feel. I added some reverb to the intro music, and I'm going to play it for you today without reverb and with reverb so you can kind of hear the difference. And we're going to keep the tempo really slow, and we're going to keep that tempo slow to really allow for a lot of space between the notes and a lot of space between the rising and falling of volumes, etc. So that's the plan going in. So I write all these patches up, including the settings for the subharmonicon and the sequences that I'm using. I put them all up in patch diagrams and post them on my Patreon page. So if you're interested in getting a deeper look into what's actually going on here, check that out. The link's down in the description. You should be able to replicate this fairly easily from those patch diagrams. So with all that said, let's head over to the Sound Studio and make some music. All right, let's get started. So first of all, we're going to connect everything up together. We're going to use the mother as our kind of control center and go assign to advanced clock and trigger into the subharmonicon. So just to go ahead and start off with the mother, these are basically the settings that I'm going to be using. It's a pulse wave. It's a pretty straightforward setting. Let me just play the sequence for you right from the beginning so you can hear what it sounds like. It's a 32-step sequence, and it's in C Lydian. Just to get us started, I'm going to play what the DFAM and the subharmonicon sound like on their own as well. So this is the DFAM sound. Pretty straightforward. That's the base settings that I have. I did tune the frequencies of the VCOs, and I'll show you why as we get into it. This is set to C2 and this is set to C4. I used my Mordax data tuner to do that. And then on the subharmonicon, this is what it sounds like with nothing patched in. It's going really, really slow. And it keeps going around and around. It's going at kind of different rates, so it'll take a long time before those to settle back again. Rhythm 1's set to 15 as a subdivision, and Rhythm 2 is set to, I think it's 11. So that's the starting point. So right from the get-go, it's not super interesting without any patching. Let's just listen to it with all together with no patching at all. This is what it sounds like. What makes this interesting is the patching that's going on and the modulation. And there's a lot of it. So let's jump in to what I have going on. The challenge for this was when I started, I was thinking, well, how can I make this dynamically complex? And obviously one of the biggest ways to do that is to control volume, to have things build up very loud and get very soft, and have different parts going up and down. There was a couple of different ways I wanted to approach that. Number one, we can open and close the cutoff. That changes. I mean, although that's affecting the frequencies, it can affect the volume too. The other is just using our VCA CVs here to actually control the volume and have those go up and down. So I wanted to do that a little bit, and really the challenge here was I kept wanting to add other modules for modulation sources, but for the sake of this exercise, I'm really trying to stick just to the Sound Studio. I had to really think and get creative about how the different modulation sources that I had available, how I could use those to accomplish that task. So obviously we have the LFO of the mother. So let's just go ahead and start there. So I have my VCF mod source set to EG because I like that envelope pop to the sound. If you turn off the envelope, it just doesn't have the same kind of pop to it. So I wanted to include that. And then I'm going to somehow get this triangle LFO into the VCF cutoff here on the mother so that both of them are modulating the cutoff, the envelope and the LFO. But I know that also I'm going to have to use this LFO for other things. So I'm going to multiply it. So that's where we're going to start, is I'm going to take the triangle out and plug it into the mult. So right now I can have two LFOs, two of the triangle LFOs coming out. So let's just go ahead and take one and put it right into the VCA CV of the DFAM. Now let's listen to what that does to the DFAM. If I turn down everything else and hit play, actually you can hear it right there. So as the LFO increases, the volume knob goes up, sound comes out, and as it decreases, it cuts off. So right there, we're getting some subtle dynamics already. We're going to have this LFO go to other places as well. But rather than just feeding it into something else, I want to get more control over it so I can attenuate it and increase the dynamics or decrease the dynamics as the song goes along. So I'm going to take that other mult and feed it into mix 2 of the VC mixer. Now the reason I'm going into mix 2 is if you go into mix 1, then if you turn this all the way to the left, you get whatever's coming into it. But if you turn it all the way to the right, you get a positive 5 volts. I think it's 5 volts. You get a positive voltage. If you go into mix 2, then all the way to the right is the full force of the LFO, and all the way to the left is 0 volts. So it really allows you to kind of choose how big that LFO is. And then we're going to come out of the mix, the VC mix out, and send it right into the cutoff. So now the cutoff's being controlled not only by the envelope, but also by the LFO, depending on how much of the VC mix I give it. So if we listen to just the DFAM and the mother, so now you're already hearing some of that dynamic sway to it generated by the LFO of the mother. So that's pretty cool. So there's a couple of other things that I wanted to do. Now, what's great is that the LFO is not clock synced. So what happens is it'll come back and forth at different parts throughout the sequence, and that's pretty cool. If I were to add other modules, I might make something like some type of trigger delay or some type of voltage delay so that the LFO impacted the DFAM and the mother at different times. But again, for this exercise, we're sticking with the Sound Studio. But it's nice to think about those things because in terms of building out into a rack, it's like a limitation like that of the LFO is impacting them both at the same time, and I wanted it to go kind of like a little bit off. That's where you could kind of go into your rack and get extra modules to accomplish whatever your vision is. But cool, so we got some good patching points. But there's more to this. I want to add in some more modulation and just kind of vary up that LFO so it's not just such a smooth up and down. And so when I think about other possible sources for modulation, the pitch sequencer on the DFAM is one that's really handy, especially if your bass settings have the sequence pitch mod to off. When it's set to off, we can use the voltages from the pitch sequencer to control other things. So because I want the rate of the LFO to kind of vary a little bit, I'm going to take the pitch out and plug it into the LFO rate. And you can see from the light on the mother what this does to it if I play it. As the pitch increases, the LFO rate increases. As the pitch decreases, it almost stops. So the way I've set the pitch on the DFAM is to be almost like a giant LFO. It's going to start all the way down, and then it's going to slowly increase to full blast on the 8th step, and then it's going to cut down to the bottom again. So it'll be almost like this ramp LFO is impacting the LFO rate knob. So it'd be like turning it up and then going all the way down really fast, going up slowly, all the way down really fast, up slowly, etc., etc. So let's hear the effect that has. It has a really cool effect. Pretty cool stuff. And because this is not clock synced, it's going to be happening at different parts in the sequence on the mother. Although, because the sequencer of the DFAM is clock synced, that warble is going to always happen at the end of the 8 steps. So it kind of does create this sort of predictability, sort of. It still feels a little bit random, but there's some sense of order to it. Now, one last bit of patching that I want to show is going from the sequencer 1 of the sub up into VCO2CV of the DFAM. Now, this is why it was so important for us to tune those. Now, the voltage from sequencer 1 of the subharmonicon is going to be impacting this oscillator. So let's hear what those tones sound like. I'm going to turn down everything but the DFAM. pretty cool. And then if I add in the VCA, that kind of wonky dynamics to it, let's listen to what it sounds like. I mean, that's really cool too. It's a great sound. And it sounds pretty abrasive when there's no reverb on it at all. But when you add in some reverb, it kind of fills in and smooths out those transients, kind of rounds out the edges a little bit more. So that's all of the patching. So let's turn on some reverb, and I'll adjust the knobs a little bit and play with it so you can kind of hear how you can get different tones out of it by adjusting the VC mix and the VCF mod amount. I'm also going to adjust the envelope amount on the subharmonicon, open up the decay a little bit on the DFAM, and the cutoff, of course. So this is what it sounds like all together. So there you go. I hope you like this patch. If you want to get a closer look, don't forget to check out my Patreon page. The link's in the description. Make sure you like and subscribe so you can see the next video. The next one is another one that I'm feeling pretty challenged with, and that's form. So I'm going to figure out how to make different forms and structures to our patches with only using the Sound Studio. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.